gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
How do you like it?
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Here's Johnny.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
Welcome to The Completionists, a podcast where three lifelong friends and aspiring movie makers discuss their first shared inspiration, Mr. Stanley Kubrick. Each episode will review Mr. Kubrick's filmography, the history, the theory, and what it means to us personally, culminating in our own endeavor to create a short film using his techniques. This is The Completionists. Hi, everybody. I am Michael Cole. I'm here with my two best friends, Wes and Pat. Wes Wennerstrom and Pat Brennan. This is our first episode, so we're still working on this format a little bit. But this podcast is going to be us talking about our past with film, as well as our hope to make a film by the end of this season of this podcast. And we're going to be using Stanley Kubrick as the model for what we're planning on doing. And so we'll be talking about his films, and we'll be talking about how they shaped us in ways, and how they affected us over the last 25 years of friendship.
Yeah, so hey, I'm Wes Wennerstrom. So I've known these guys since freshman year of high school. Actually, I've known Mike since middle school when I transferred into Catholic school when I was younger. And we were just kind of ragtaggy outcast guys, and we didn't play much. We didn't do sports or anything like that, and we kind of rallied around love of watching these classic films. And we used to get together with our pizza and soda and watch Kubrick films late at night, and we would kind of romanticize that process and dream of making our own film. So we gave it a few tries, and when we were talking about making this podcast, we kind of developed this angle for trying to shoot this Kubrick-esque film. The technology is just so much more accessible nowadays. I think we're actually going to make this dream happen, so I'm really excited to be working on this. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I just want to correct you before Pat dives in. You said we were not sports people. I lettered in high school.
Well, I guess I was on the baseball team for my hometown, but not the actual high school. So, all right, a little bit of sports here, and Pat's a sports fan, so we're not. Yeah. Sorry, everybody that wants us to be like the very, very sensitive, not sports guys. We're okay with sports, I guess. All right, sorry. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, I met these guys in high school, and those days, watching movies, trying to make movies, they weren't, it wasn't like I think you guys had more of the dream of being a director than I did, but it meant a lot to me, in retrospect, at the time too, because I liked hanging out with you guys. But in retrospect, I look back at you guys helped me get into movies on a deeper level, and Kubrick is pretty key part of that, and it was kind of the first artist that I kind of really got into on a deep, mature level, as deep as you can be in high school. But and that is an incredibly important part of my life now. I still am, a pretty big cinephile, and love art, and all those things are still present in my life, and it really started at that point. So that's part of what really makes this exciting for me is getting to do this with you two guys. You've been two of my best friends for how many years I'm not going to say, but it's still and connecting with you guys on this level and doing this sort of stuff again is just really fun, even if we can't necessarily be in the same place doing it the same way that we used to. it's still really meaningful and really exciting for me.
Great, yeah. I want to address you said not in the same place. I don't know if we've mentioned to the audience yet, but so we live in 3 wildly different areas geographically. Not, I mean, like Wes and I probably have almost 4,500 miles between us, 4,000 miles, something like that.
Yep.
I don't know that we necessarily need to go into exactly what states we're in or anything. But,
Yeah, whatever.
then,
I'm in beautiful.
Pat's in the Midwest.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very proud to be. I live in Olympia, Washington. It's a very cool town. I really enjoy it up here.
What's your address again? in case we really piss off some cinephiles and they want to come. Hey, I don't agree with what you said. Yeah, I think that it's cool because technologically, when we had a hard time technologically when the 3 of us lived, Wes and I, we lived 5 minutes apart in high school, and Pat, what'd you live, like 20 minutes away?
Yeah.
And we had a difficult time technologically because we graduated high school in 2003, so this is all like 2001 to 2003 that we're talking about from our high school experience, and that was, we had such a technological hurdle to come over, and now we're like, okay, we're gonna we're gonna record a podcast without ever getting out and seeing each other like in person, and we're gonna shoot these 3 parts of a movie that we'll piece together into one movie without having to physically interact, which obviously we do see each other but the fact that we don't have to be able to see, to be able to get together like this is excellent.
We do get together once a year, and it's very debauched.
Yes.
Yeah.
We went to high school together.
Yeah. All right. So we kind of alluded to it. I would like to get into a little bit of our lore, maybe with the specific high school stuff. So I think the first place to start is the technological. So when we were in high school, I got my grandmother got me the original iMac with iMovie, and
the big CRT round thing.
Yeah, yeah, and a video camera, like a camcorder, with those little mini DV cassettes, and that was what we used. I think I also had a boom mic, but it was like I had a boom mic, and then I had a PVC pipe with the mic stand duct taped to it.
Did you have like weights on the bottom too, like actual?
No, that was the Steadicam that we made.
Right.
We saw it some like tutorial on how to make it, and this is pre-YouTube, so this was like an actual photos and like a blog kind of tutorial on how to make a Steadicam, and my dad helped with the pipe glue and stuff to make a Steadicam with a couple of gym weights on PVC piping, and but so that was the equipment we were working with. And for the audience, if you're not familiar with those tapes, we film on digital now. A lot of the world films on digital now, and stuff that you watch on Netflix and everywhere else is digital, but it's just a different level than what we had back then. To compare it, it's like riding a Vespa versus like a Ferrari. These are not technically, they both have engines, but they're not the same thing.
Well, I remember the big thing was that it filmed in 24 frames per second, so it sort of looked like film, and that was the big difference.
Yeah.
So that was when there was like this kind of like I don't know, like a sea change that happened, right? All of a sudden, people could shoot on digital. Not a lot of directors did. I think maybe David Lynch did one film on like a DV format, but it was like this very new thing back then.
The early adapters were probably David Lynch,
Steven Soderbergh, probably.
Danny Boyle. I think that 28 Days Later was his first digital movie. And when you look at it, and sometimes for the aesthetic that you want for a movie, it works. But when you look at 28 Days Later, 20 years after that movie came out, I think it looks pretty dated, like the cinematography. Not to knock the film, he did what he could, and he's made amazing shit. So I'm not. He's done more than I have, but it does look dated. And that was one of the critiques that was coming out at the time, and I feel like Christopher Nolan, even though he was like a brand new filmmaker who had just come out with Memento, was already big into the like, this is not good stuff that we're working with here. And while I think he's still saying that 20 years later, and I think that there's an argument to be made for the high def, at 4K, 8K digital stuff, and that his argument made 100% sense back then. What the problem was like, how do you afford to get film if you're 3 17-year-olds?
Yeah,
it's a completely prohibitive cost.
I
remember at one point we talked about it, and I remember it being like, if we don't make any mistakes and have to reshoot any shots, and we make like an 80-minute feature, and we use every single thing in it that we shoot, the rental and everything else will cost us $16,000. Wow. I remember I think you had looked through all the details and came up with that, and I was like, how the fuck are we going to get $16,000? Like, we work at grocery stores, and we have the money to go to the movies once a week and buy ourselves a little bit of soda and popcorn, like, and that is literally our entire budget in the whole world, and we're going to get $16,000.
We tried. We approached I approached my parents, and they were like, "Yeah, no way,"
I did not approach my parents. My parents,
I think I might
have
have
been
undersold it too. Like, $4,000. Yeah, no way.
No, I think my dad was all about, like, if we needed help building something, he would have built whatever. But I mean, $16,000 for my parents was like, it wasn't even an option of, like, I don't think they would have been able to give us $16,000 to just throw at a movie, which that's a lot of assumptions when you're saying no mistakes and stuff.
Yeah,
too,
and I think a big part of it is,
especially when we
have. Sorry.
I was gonna say, especially when none of us had exposed film properly before either. So this wasn't even like we're seasoned vets who know what we're doing. We're talking about just saying like, oh yeah, we're gonna get these big film canisters and we're gonna do everything right the first time. But and
I was about to say, we came from like a kind of middle American, not a small suburban, like a suburb of Boston. And we didn't really have a concept of being like punk rock and like, making like these experimental short films, right? Like that. I don't think it really occurred to us. We were thinking feature. And then I think at one point, maybe we had all read Robert Rodriguez's 7-Minute Film School. Did we do that? Yeah. And we were kind of inspired by that and thought maybe that we could make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie, that book really got us going, because especially when you came with that $16,000 number, which, by the way, is like twice what he made
El Mariachi
for. I think he made it for 8. Now that was 10 years earlier or more, but I think when we started talking $16,000, we were like, oh, what if we got on some experimental drug? What if we sell blood and semen? So anyway, I think that so that's the technological side of things. We did come up with an idea back then, and we started filming, and we kept retooling, and it was pretty bad, pretty hack.
Pretty hack, yeah.
I mean, I think we should have, like, I think at that point in your life, you should just kind of go ahead and do the thing, even if it's bad, for the experience. And we did. I remember being in your basement, Wes, shooting scenes, having like Amy as the boom operator, and me being on the couch with my like face covered in like dirty laundry so that like I could be another character in the movie, and I was just like the roommate character. And you remember that? And John Burrell whacking me with the hat.
Yes.
And then like the button that's on the top of the hat like stung in my back, and I was like, what the fuck? So we like, but what was the concept for that movie was depressed kid with this kind of bully friend that we find out at the end is the invisible friend. And this is the year that Beautiful Mind was big still. Fight Club was only a year or two old. There was probably 5 or 6 others that I'm not thinking of, but it was like
stuff like that.
Yeah, it was the time of the like, oh, they were never here to begin with at the end of the movie, and that was what our twist was. And
it was by that plus Goodwill Hunting.
Yes,
that was like your formula.
Yeah. And at the end of what ended up being the end of our filming, Wes, you were like, everybody's doing this, and I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
But when you're young, I mean, like, I don't know. Also to be fair, like, it was an idea that didn't take like special effects or a lot of actors or things like that. So it just, just doing that whole like unreliable narrator thing, and like, plus it was close to our lives. Yeah. We all were just like living in a small town, struggling a little bit with depression, and it was very relatable as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do remember. I want to tell one fun story. Wes, you went on vacation to your parents' main house or whatever it was, and we were like, we're gonna film some stuff while you're gone to try to get more done. And I actually think we did a really good job makeup wise. We used food coloring and Vaseline to make like a bruise, and so like we just bruised up my eye, and I like got up out of this ditch, and like Pat I think filmed it, and I walked out of the ditch like I had just been like beaten and left in this ditch, and the cops came while we were like filming, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're making a movie." And he's like, "You don't have a permit." And I'm like, "We're 17. Like, what are you fucking talking about?"
Wow, that's very Massachusetts police officer. Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah. We didn't get our cut, so. But I remember that cop coming and everyone being like, "Oh fuck," and I remember being like, no one else would talk to him, so I've got this like bright purple bruise, like glistening bruise on my face, and walking up to him and him being like, "Are you okay?" And me being like, "Oh yeah, it's just makeup. It's just we're making a movie." And he's like, "No, not on the side of the road. You're not." And I'm like, "All right, see you later."
Yeah, and I think it's another piece of it is we didn't have a real supportive environment for this. We didn't go to like an arts school. We went to a small Catholic school. It was mostly sports oriented. There was drama, but we had no access to anything technical at all. I mean, so.
Yeah. Well, at one point, so before we started that, I had written a script at the end, the summer between freshman and sophomore year. I wrote a script with what Pat will remind me is the worst title of any movie ever made, called Bloodstained Hearts. And it was, script-wise, it was essentially 13 Reasons Why, but like 20 years before that show came out, and definitely not as good and not as well written. But like concept-wise, it was exactly that show, basically. Like it was somebody who killed themselves, and we see them through their bullies, through all the different bullies' eyes. So like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It was pretty much exactly 13 Reasons Why without the sexual assault. And when I showed it to Mr. Flynn and was like, I want to make this, but I would need to like shoot at the school. And he was like, we can 100% do that. And I was getting people like lined up, and we were like, I was showing the script to people and be like, do you want to play this part? Do you want to play this part? We were getting things lined up. And then Mrs. Butt was like, no, there's swearing and suicide in that. Yeah. You're not fucking making that movie in the school. And like, I was so close. It was I don't know that I've ever been that close to making a feature film since. I'm going to be 40 years old in a couple months, and I peaked at almost 16. So, Should we talk more about our early Kubrick feelings and how
Can I real quick? I'm just remembering the script
Yeah.
that I was writing in high school. Do you remember Touchdown
Yeah.
Supermarket?
I remember you and I both working at
Big
both worked at the
supermarket.
same different supermarkets that were we worked at Victory and we worked at Price Chopper together, and I remember us both talking about having an idea for a workplace because I think we'd seen Clerks and we were
Yeah.
like, we could do this. Like, your idea was much more avant-garde, and mine was very much just like kind of Clerks, but like about a guy who's just like his whole lot in life is to be a cashier, and he like zones into it, and I thought it was going to be hysterical.
Yeah.
You remember? And I thought it was like the best bit in the world that anybody comes up with a piece of fruit and he doesn't have to look at the sticker to see the 4-digit code. He knows every piece of produce. And you were like, I don't want to make that movie.
yeah. They're definitely different. My idea was that it would be a supermarket that was like laid out like a football field. So it'd be like, they'd have end zones in both parts, and they would have like big uprights in the back, and like there would just be like nonstop like football innuendo and stuff. And there was just these two teenagers that were like, this is the worst fucking place to work in the world, So, but hey, they could be combined. So
yeah,
maybe we'll see how this film goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, back to Kubrick. I am trying to think of what my introduction to Kubrick was, and it's probably Full Metal Jacket, if I'm being honest. I don't know about you guys, but I think, and I don't think I saw the whole movie first, but I think people quoted it more than anything else, and especially like, and it's that and like 2 or 3 other Vietnam movies that kind of came out at the same time that had drill sergeants, and so people would be like, "How tall are you? I didn't know they stacked shit that high." So like, I may actually be bleeding in 3 movies. Yeah. So it might be like 3 different movies in my head as far as those lines, but like there was a lot of that going on. It was a very homophobic time, and so like all of the stuff that was said by Arlie Ermy and the other movies' counterparts were stuff that like teenage boys like to say to each other, and so I think that was my introduction. And then I think you were like, "Oh, I've seen that movie that's from," and I think we watched it, and that was when we were like, "Oh, okay." And then you were like, "He's got other," we'd all heard of 2001, and I think we started watching 2001, which I've only seen all the way through once. I have been high on a plane a few times and decided to just put it on because I don't need to like pay attention. And I always skip ahead to the light show. It's amazing. And Logan's been sitting next to me being like, "What is this movie?" And I'm like, "It's just really cool." He's like, "You don't have headphones on." I'm like, "I don't need them."
That was like a major thing. From all like the podcasts I've been listening to and books I've read, that people like to do LSD and go see that movie, when it came out. Yeah, they were really into it.
Why it became a hit, yeah.
I'm interested. That's one of the ones I'm probably interested in rewatching the most, because I had when I watched, the reason why I've only watched it once is I remember thinking like, after the first half, I don't understand this movie. And I also think that one of my impressions about Kubrick's work, which at this point we've watched all the shorts and a couple of the they considered them features at the time. We wouldn't consider them features by today's standards. But like, one of the things I remember from us being teenagers watching is that his movies had a instead of like a 3-act structure, I always thought they had like a 2 different, like a dichotomy structure, and sometimes it was really interesting to do that, but it was also meaning that like Full Metal Jacket, I loved the first half and I hated the second half. I haven't watched that one in a long time, or I think I just didn't get or care about the second half. And then same thing kind of with Clockwork Orange. Like once he goes to prison, like everything always felt very split down the middle for me, which is so out of out of, even when you're watching stuff that's not very specifically like the hero's journey 3 act structure concept, you get there's some like level of basic, so like even when you're used to stuff that doesn't fall right into like what we would consider like formulaic, like it still follows that 3 act structure a lot closer than anybody but Kubrick, essentially. It's so, you know what I mean? Like, even you look at like Tarantino, and Tarantino will mix it all around, but it's got a 3 act structure. And anybody else. So like, there's creative ways of doing it. And then Kubrick always felt like he was just doing a different thing to me. I don't know if that's, if you share that.
Yeah, I think he has something. The plotting of his movies is, definitely different. I think part of that is, we've talked about like how all of his movies from The Killing on are literary adaptations, and I think like that sort of twofold structure kind of is a little bit more common in novels. A lot of times you'll kind of see like a part 1, part 2.
Right.
But it is something that's really notable, and like it's so like a lot of times it's like aesthetically apparent too. Like 2001 is a great example where there's lots of stuff, beautiful imagery going on in the first half, but then you get to the second part of the journey, and it becomes this total trip of a movie, and something that had never been seen on screen before. So it's not just necessarily a story structure. Sometimes it feels like a lot of times he's building from something that is a little bit more conventional to something that has like more of a dreamlike or stranger quality in the second half.
Yeah. The thing that you said about the literary, they're all based on some literary work. Dr. Strangelove is based on a book. Is it? I always, from what I had read about that book, I have never read the book. It's somewhat of a nonfiction manual, isn't it? Or is that incorrect?
I have not read it, but I think it's a novel that is like the basic plot of Dr. Strangelove, but it's completely different than Dr. Strangelove. That's my understanding. I haven't read the book yet. I bought it. But.
I was under the impression it was like literally someone wrote this is what we need to do in case of nuclear war, or this is what will happen in case of a nuclear war.
That's possible.
Like a manual, and then he was like, "Oh, this is hilarious." I will say, so Dr. Strangelove, going into things, Dr. Strangelove is my favorite. It is the only movie of his that I have sat down and watched start to finish more than once.
I have a specific memory, Mike, of kind of being like, "Oh, we're going to watch Dr. Strangelove," and I was like wondering how you're going to react to it. And then they just get to that part where he's like, "You can't fight in here. This is the war room," and you just busted up laughing. And I was like, "Oh, cool. He gets it. It's a comedy."
Yep. Well, yeah, that was a very different political time for me, obviously. But yeah, that's one of my favorite lines of all time. I put that in the intro like that when I said, "Oh, we're gonna make this podcast," I'm like, "Well, I absolutely know what clip is getting used in something," and there was so many other ones, and I was like, I'll put all the obvious ones in the intro, and if we do bumpers for if Pat talks about the book or whatever, if we do a bumper for those things, I'll pick something that's less obvious for those. So like, I also love from Dr. Strangelove when the guy who played Pat, and why am I spacing on his name?
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott, when he gets the call and he turns around, he's like, "I told you never to call me here." Like, he's getting a call from his mistress in the war room during a nuclear Armageddon. To me, it is the best. I would argue that it's one of my top two or three favorite comedies of all time. It's also the only movie on this list that I'm going to be able to watch with Logan while we're doing this. Like, I can actually just throw that on, and Logan, I don't know if he'll find it funny. He'll probably be like, "It's black and white."
I think people also miss that, oftentimes he gets Kubrick gets thought of as like this like really dark, sterile hermit, but his movies are actually like really funny. Like I rewatched Clockwork Orange, and just the end, like I was walking around like days afterwards going, "Steaky Wags and Eggy Wags," you know, just like. Yeah, a lot of them just have really, really funny moments. Like even the end of The Shining, you know, and that's like the dark humor is just so enduring, you know, something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even like 2001, the Daisy, give me your answer, do. Like it's a serious moment, but like that is a really funny thing to hear, you know, like in that like declining voice, you know, and that just it's intentionally kind of darkly comic, you know, and I think it's something that really does come through in a lot of his work.
Yeah, no, and I noticed in the shorts that there was moments where I was like, oh, this is you can see the Kubrick in there already.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot where you're like, oh, this isn't there
just,
yet.
What's the first one? The Flying Padre. I guess we could start getting into it, but that one, I thought that had like just excellent dark humor. I was just watching it like, whoa, this is really weird. You know?
I didn't really do any research other than what are the shorts before diving into the shorts. So like just what are the titles? Where can I find them? So I didn't like look. Is this a documentary or is this what? And so starting off with Flying Padre, I was immediately like, oh shit! Like this is just a newsreel. It's weird. It's like weird, and it's it's somewhat like human interest piece on the news like we would see now where you're like, oh, this dog collected lemonade from 19 stands, or like weird like human story, but in like 1950s newsreel format. And I was like, this is real weird. Like what, I don't know if every newsreel I've ever seen has been serious and has been like very probably World War II based or Depression based, so it's been very dry. And so to see that, I was like, "Is this was this a common thing?" And I don't know. Maybe you guys know, or was that just Kubrick being like, "Hey, this is weird. Let's do this."
I read a little bit about. I've been reading a biography as we've been going, and how this came. It was originally how it came about was his high school friend who was also getting into filmmaking was working for March of Time, which was a big newsreel maker run by Time magazine, and it was really like that kind of storytelling, like kind of human interest, you know, alternative to, you know, like hard news stories. But he was like, oh, we can, you know, self-finance and make these, you know, both Flying Padre and Day of the Fight were made that way. Like, we're just going to pay for this, you know, ourselves. We have savings from, you know, being photographers and stuff like that. And March of Time didn't end up buying them. RKO bought them, and for like no profit whatsoever. But yeah, so it was a thing that was around, but I think there's definitely a different touch to a lot of his stuff doing this than was going on then. I think like especially Day of the Fight feels like much like deeper than, you know, what the type of stuff they were doing through that. Flying Padre is probably closer to it, but it is like this kind of, you know, just weird, ridiculous story as well.
I really liked. I will say that both of those two are my favorites of the shorts of all 5 that we watched. I really liked Flying Padre and was like, I didn't have any of that. I didn't know where.
Should we tell the audience what it was about?
And sure, so Flying Padre is, and Pat, if you have this in front of you, I don't know if you do or not, but the times for the timestamps on these, but
1951 was Flying Padre.
Flying Padre is 1951, and it was probably, I think that one was like 4 or 5 minutes. Am I right?
Yeah, it's pretty short. Maybe 8 minutes max. Yeah.
So it's about a priest who got a plane in the early 50s, and he's is it New Mexico or Arizona? I think it was New Mexico. New Mexico. And so he's able to fly to help his parishioners and the people in his community. One of the things that they show, which I'm almost positive is a reenactment, is him going, there's a baby with a fever, and they're too far away from a hospital or a main road. So he flies out, gets the mother and the baby, and then flies them to where an ambulance can take them. It was interesting. And that's pretty much the whole thing, is like, this is the Flying Padre. It was interesting to see that they tried to fake diegetic audio a little bit, like a tiny little bit, with like the church bells and I think it was, and the engines of the plane. But then there was lots of the talking heads with no audio because they probably didn't have sync sound equipment, because they were, they're kids. They were probably 22 years old, something like that when that movie came out. So when they made that movie, so they didn't have sync sound because that was two different setups back then, and so you have them recording all the film, and then the audio gets cut in separately, and it's pretty clear that the church bells and the engine noises are separate audio tracks, which given the aesthetic, it did not bother me as much as it will in one of the upcoming shorts that we're going to talk about. But yeah, so what'd you guys think of that one?
Yeah, just on the sync sound, I think maybe Seafarers only has one scene of sync sound, and I think that's the only thing that has sync sound that we've watched in these shorts. Like, even Killer's Kiss is like, they tried to do it. The audio guy was getting in the way of the lights, actually, and like that. And he fired him because he liked his lighting setup more than the audio.
Yeah. So, and that was what I was going to say, is the sync sound in, or the fake diegetic sound in Killer's Kiss. There's parts where I'm fine with it. There's a lot where I was like, it's not great. So I liked Flying Padre. I thought it was interesting, and it had, considering what trying to consider what he had for equipment, I thought it was pretty good. Like the fact that he's got a shot of the mother and the baby in the back seat of the plane while it's flying, means that he either flew the plane himself and turned around, or he gave the Flying Padre the camera, who then turned around. So like there was some spots where I'm like, this is impressive. Like given the limitations, like this is impressive.
Yeah.
So
and I think
I liked it.
Kubrick just has a knack for picking really good stories, and it just goes so far. Such a simple concept, but like such a just interesting character setup. It's just and then like with the boxing movie, The Day of the Fight, it's not like it was such an amazing concept. I mean, I like that he was kind of shoot, my battery's gonna die. I like that he was taking these documentary subjects and then reenacting a documentary with them. But I like just there were some interesting visual things in the boxer one, like the twins that woke up in the same bed. I was just like, oh, that's really interesting. And it just made me want to keep watching. Like if someone walked into the room, they'd be like, huh, what is this? So yeah, interesting subject.
Yeah. I will say, and this is just like with The Day of the Fight, and obviously it's 20, almost 30 years earlier, but I just kept thinking that it I don't know if it influenced it or if it was just that there was a black and white boxer movie, but it reminded me so much of Raging Bull.
Yeah.
And when the twins were in bed together, I was like, oh, that would be hilarious to have a scene of Jake LaMotta and Joey LaMotta in bed together with De Niro, like because it's a completely platonic thing, and given the 50s or the maybe even the 40s, depending on when it was supposed to take place, it's not unrealistic. I could imagine it, but those two characters, the idea of these brutal guys just being like snuggled up is
Yeah, I have a feeling that it was an influence on Raging Bull, actually, because like Scorsese's a big Kubrick fan, and knowing Scorsese, if he's making a movie about boxing, he's like tracking down every movie about boxing he can find, and digging up film strips and stuff. And so I definitely had the same thought. Like, it feels a lot like Raging Bull, just like that old New York feel, plus the boxing, and like even like the fight scenes aren't as good as Raging Bull, but like the way he kind of captures it, and it's like shooting from under the stool at one point, and kind of like getting right up against the ropes and shooting from underneath, has a very similar kind of like visceral, you're in the ring kind of feel to it.
Yeah. And the hairstyle.
Yes.
I know that it's probably just that was the style of the time, but it just feels so specific to Jake LaMotta to me, that seeing it on a black and white, and I would say, so I don't know how much you guys have watched of other movies of the time, compared to Day of the Fight, but the black and white to me felt so much more stark in contrast and like clean than a lot of 50s movies do. Like, it seemed a lot, there's a lot more grayscale to me in a lot of those. And this seemed like, when you shoot black and white now, typically you're getting these real rich blacks, and this, it felt more like that, which is part of why I think I associated it with Raging Bull, because Raging Bull to me is one of, there's parts where there's a lot of film noise and stuff because they're in low light, but overall it's one of the most stark black and white movies because it wasn't filmed in the time. Yeah. So for this guy on his second, that was a 14-minute short. Was it 53? Is that what the year?
No, it was also 51.
51? Okay. Yeah. This is, that's really interesting and impressive. And part of that is possibly due to light. Yeah. You can shoot better due to light. And going back to technology for a second, film versus digital. With film, you want to overexpose a little bit, or underexpose a little bit, and on digital you'd overexpose, and so you can get those things. So if he got it exposed perfectly in good lighting, he could bring that. He could bring those blacks, down by how he developed them as well. But it was you just don't see that. But again, the stuff that wasn't in the ring was outside, and the ring probably had very good lighting. Just naturally in a ring would have pretty good lighting, and then outside it looked like it was daytime every time. So also good lighting. But I really enjoyed that. I was like, I did not expect 1951 to have that at all.
Yeah. I think it reflects. Oh, go ahead, Wes.
I was going to say I felt the exact same way, and I think he really had a gift at a young age with shooting on film. And that's kind of what got
I think it reflects a lot. I mean, the Day of the Fight was based on a photo series he did for Look magazine, and I think it really reflects the way that he took pictures. So if you look at his pictures for Look Mag, it's a lot of negative space, so a lot of black, deep blacks, or sky, gray in the sky, and so it's I definitely felt that it was very much intentionally kind of designed to look like his photography, because really it was just kind of taking photographic storytelling and put it together.
Nice, so. Yeah. Fear and Desire.
Oh man.
I don't think that just based on your reaction, I don't think that we had any difference of opinion on this one. And Kubrick himself did this is the one film Kubrick was like, I wish I could destroy every single copy of that film. It's not good.
It has kind of a campiness to it though that's kind of fun. Just that intro. I wish I could. I don't have it in front of me, but it's I could just picture this being screamed over metal music. Yeah. It's so dark, It's the fear of the mind, the country of the mind, or something like that. And then just I remember the guy floating on the raft down the river when he's dying, and he's like, "No more Sundays, no more 1,000 other things." Just such weird lines, Yeah. So, but it was cool to see
Right.
Yeah.
them just get in their footing.
I think that
So,
one of the things that caught me about it was, it was a hard watch. I did not really, I wouldn't say I enjoyed that one. But one of the things that caught my attention was that there's two things that I think he was clearly going for in this that he, I think, botched and then improved so much more significantly in pretty much everything else I remember from him. So the first thing being, he always, to me, feels like there's a vagueness in the place and time. I mean, even like, some of them are very specific. Vietnam movie, but there's always like this is not entirely connected with the real world kind of feeling to his movies, but in a way that feels purposeful. This had that. In this, I thought did it poorly because they're like talking about like,
yes,
do they even speak English? And I get it. Also, at the time, you only hired white people and like, but like, do they speak English? And then it's like they come out and you're like, if you didn't have slightly different uniforms, I wouldn't know the difference between these two sides. And there is something to be said. Like, there's a way of doing that is really effective to show, metaphorically, like, oh, we're all the same. I think that it was more like a failing of resources, probably, or something. And I think that it's probably resources because even the guys that were the main characters had like a different uniform each, because I think they were like, hey, what uniform do you have that you can bring to shoot? And it was like, oh, I got a helmet and some camo. I got like an officer's uniform. So there was like that weird disconnect with reality that I think he nails in other stuff that I don't think he nailed it here. And then the second thing that really I thought he did poorly in this, that he ended up getting really getting good at in other stuff, is when he was going for subtlety and metaphor. Sometimes I almost felt like in his other movies, sometimes it's so subtle that I'm like, I don't know what the fuck he's trying to get at. In this, I felt like we were getting beaten over the head a little bit with some of the metaphorical like messaging, and and I don't, and I feel like after watching, the next, what's the, that was Fear and Desire. Yeah, after watching Killer's Kiss. I'm like, okay, like he learned quickly on those. Like even though I think Killer's Kiss had its issues, I think Killer's Kiss solved those problems, and it was his next narrative fiction movie. But like those two things to me really stuck out as being like, these are things I think of him as being good at, and he's not good at them right now.
Right. Yeah, I kind of got the same feel. Like you can definitely see what would come out of that. But that's sort of like looking at it in retrospect. I don't know if Stanley Kubrick never made another movie, we would think like he was almost there, Yeah. Yeah, I thought this was not a good movie at all. Like not, not good, but I thought it was really interesting because it felt a little bit like, I think there were some things where there was parts of it where it was like they might not have known what they were doing, but if you look at it, it's like it felt almost like ahead of its time in a weird way. Like where if it had come out maybe like in 1962 instead of 1952, after like the French New Wave and everything, it might have gotten like a little bit of a following or something like that, and been like this, kind of weird war movie that came out at that time. But it just doesn't work when it came out, and it doesn't feel right. Like it doesn't have that sort of self-awareness that it would have had 10 years later.
Right.
And,
it wants to be a Hollywood movie.
And they had some like crazy ambitions for this. They were like talking about it like, oh yeah, this isn't cinema, this is poetry, this is this is going to be the end of cinema as we know it. And it's like, no, you made a kind of crappy movie.
I mean, to be fair, like when we were talking about our movie that we wanted to make, and we were like, this is really hack. We're now 40-year-old men talking about that and being like, yeah, we at 16 we were like, what if we do this? And like, I mean, he was a little older than we were, but he was probably less than 10 years older than we were. And it was his first time telling a story that wasn't a true story on film. I will say, to give this movie some credit, there was some cinematography stuff that was great.
They're like walking through the woods and there's like the fog and everything, and that just felt like really good. again,
Oh, that was
kind
cool.
of ahead of its time. Like that wasn't something that you were seeing a lot in the 50s. But
the close-ups on eyes,
yeah,
the detail in eyes, like
right.
is something that I don't remember ever seeing in a movie back then.
Yeah.
Like there were somewhat locked off
Yeah.
shots because probably to be able to get those kind of focal, to get those kind of shutter speeds, to get that kind of precision. But like there's a couple shots when they got the woman's eyes and they've got one of the guy's eyes, and it's like you could see the different like colors in the pupil in the gloss of the eye in a way that you never saw in 1953.
Yeah. And again, that's Kubrick's gift. He's just such a his gifted eye and
his art
equipment.
school or his high school teacher, art teacher said, you know, like he tried to get him into cinematography because he was interested in cinematography, and he sucked at high school and didn't, you know, pay attention to anything else. When he got like introduced him to it and like showed him, you know, how to do a few things, he was like, this kid's like the Picasso of cinematography. Like he was just such a natural at it, and that totally shines through here. And I also think like a lot of it doesn't feel, I think you're right, like it doesn't feel like the 50s. Like I think you know, I was reading he was going to like MoMA a lot at the time and seeing movies there. And I think he was seeing a lot of like silent movies, so like German expressionism, Sergei Eisenstein, like stuff like that. And that felt very much like that, like early montage, like really focusing on, you know, different parts of people's faces and stuff like that. That felt really apparent in this.
And that makes sense because when you look at a lot of those things too, there's a precision there that Hollywood movies did not have in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Like right. You look at like the editing precision of Eisenstein, like is like everything else feels very much like what we would consider like a fluff piece now.
Yeah.
But Eisenstein with the editing, like the real tight, like almost machine work editing, and then you get that like the rich blacks and like the and colors of the German expressionism. Like that is way, now that you say that, that makes way more sense because I'm thinking of Hollywood stuff, which is very, I mean, you know, color was already on its way and stuff, but like even like you think about the movies that were winning, you know, the best picture and cinematography, a lot of that was because they had like spectacle, not because there was like that much technical. And he had and that's a big way we've transitioned in the last 75, 80 years, and partly probably because of Kubrick. Well, I would imagine largely because of Kubrick, because you now like think about what our independent movie system is, and you can get really good cinematography in, you know, a rundown apartment, as opposed to in 1950 you'd be going to like, you know, let's film Cleopatra and have big set pieces, and the camera just doesn't fuck it up, basically.
Yeah.
I again did not know what to expect.
Fairly brief about this one.
And I was like, okay, is this going to be a narrative fiction, or is this a documentary? And then to see it was basically a like union promo in 1950. Was it 53 again, or is this 54? Yeah, that a union promo in 1953 at the beginning of your career. That is a bold move.
That's true.
And it seemed like the context of the film kind of made me think like, oh, they're not treating this like it's a controversial take, really. They're just trying to explain to you like it was like a pro, like you'd watch.
Well, it was an ad for. I mean, like he got hired to make an ad for them. So yeah. But I mean, and also he wasn't really, at least in terms of his early movies, he was not like a big union guy, because all these movies were shot like people from unions would ask like, hey, have you checked with the union on this like you're supposed to? And he was like, yeah, sure. He just didn't even think about that at all.
No, and I don't mean that when I say bold, I mean
right.
Like you might have a problem working if you get too close to communism, and that's if you're a seasoned vet. If you're a 26-year-old kid trying to make a your like fourth short movie, and you're like, okay, unions. That's bold.
Yeah. And ultimately, he left the U.S. and we'll get into that later. But he moved to Great Britain and was shooting there because he didn't do the Hollywood system. So that's a big piece of this as well.
One thing that I found interesting about this one is I think that it's probably in some ways the weakest of the cinematography, but it is also probably because unlike the other documentaries, pretty much nothing that I could spot was staged.
Yeah.
And so I think it was probably like, you're going to actually come in and make a genuine documentary, not a reenactment documentary. And that, so like not the cinematography is not bad, but it's nothing popped out to me about it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's his first color film, and like the last one he would make until Spartacus. It was, I don't think the cinematography is that great, but I think like there's a few spots like there's like the machine imagery, and then that shot of the cafeteria that's like long tracking shot that feels, like kind of an early thing for him to be doing. That would become is one of his hallmarks,
Yeah.
I also thought it had like a little bit of like a campy quality. I think that might just be the way, SIU, ads.
Dawn, whatever his name is.
But it was just that I did get that feel like it did feel like there was a little bit of a sense of humor, like when in the cafeteria, like there's, they're shooting all this like really, like brightly colored food and everything. It just sort of felt like John Waters-y to me,
Yeah. My favorite part for like the camp quality was when they're asking guys like, what do you think a union does for you? And like one guy's like, it makes sure that I get like the best money possible, blah, blah, blah. And then the final guy goes, if I see other fellas doing something, I want to do it too. And I was just like, what? I watched this today. I didn't think it was bad. I thought there was some parts were really good. As you mentioned before, Pat, there's some audio issues, which I think that most of the audio not being perfectly synced is fine for me. And there's a couple spots where I thought the audio was a little uneven, but like if as somebody who audio is my downside on my filmmaking abilities, I don't want to fault him for that. The one thing on this one that I thought was interesting is it's a complaint I've never had about any of his movies before. And actually it's not a complaint that I come up with very often, is towards the end during that fight, I thought that the sense of space was really bad. I could not tell, like at parts where if they're coming around the corner at each other or they're like sneaking around, like I could not place it. And then, there's that, the 180 degree, rule. You keep everything on the same side of that 180 degree line. They break the rule, which I'm fine with breaking the rule. A lot of movies do. I don't think he did it in a way that helped the situation. I think when I'm already like, I don't know where in this warehouse room you are compared to each other, and then you start breaking the rules, then I'm like, this is not making it easier for me. And so that was my big complaint about the movie. But otherwise, like I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I thought it was a significantly better story and better told story than Fear and Desire. I was a little surprised at the not even innuendo, but like frank dialogue about sex and showing them like not in bed together, but like at a bed together, while her saying like love isn't the same as bedding someone, and he gets down next to her on the bed, and I was like, oh, okay, this is more than I would have expected. I don't know what is it the Hays Code?
Yeah,
Pat. I don't know what the Hays Code would have been in effect for a movie of that level.
Because it was independently produced and distributed by UA, I don't think the Hays Code, because the Hays Code was all the studios policing themselves.
Right, right.
So UA distributed this, like they did as like a B movie first, and it did okay. And then they played it in Europe, and then they played it in New York again, but they played it as like a dirty movie, like basically in Times Square, actually, afterwards. And I think it's because of that, because it's a little bit more frank in its sexuality, which gives you the idea of, what type of dirty movies we're playing in, 1955.
Yeah. Now we can see fisting and
there's almost like that. Yeah, there's almost that voyeuristic thing with him, like watching her across the way.
Oh yeah, and
it's funny because I didn't think about it that way. I guess it felt more tender to me, like their relationship, and then when she's talking about her, like what was her mother or sister was the dancer?
Yeah,
her sister, who by the way was Kubrick's wife.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you all knew that. But yeah, I like that. I like he doesn't think that she's going to come in the end, and she does. I really like the love story.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I just was surprised at what I considered relatively frankness for the times. As far as the watching her across the way, at first I was like, oh, this feels like my 2024 mind is thinking this. And then when he is trying to get off the phone and you can see her reflection or in the background, I'm like, oh no, he wants to get off the phone because he wants to watch her without being bothered. And I was like, okay, that it's not like necessarily creepy, but it is definitely sexual, to some extent. But yeah, and that and then the fact that like she was side chick basically for that guy, and like they're and they had stuff like that in movies at the time, but I'm thinking about The Apartment, and that's almost 10 years later. But like a lot of that stuff was so much more innuendo than I think this was.
Yeah, you saw a lot of stuff in comedies, I would think, like it was a little bit more frank, or maybe more like innuendo, but a little bit more explicit than, I'm just thinking of like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is pretty, up there about sex, and I think that's around.
Just put your lips together and blow.
But I think it's part of it is just that it's independently produced, and could they can do pretty much what they want, and if they don't want to distribute it, they don't distribute it. I thought it was really interesting to see, because it is a really big step forward, and I felt like there's some story stuff that doesn't work. There's some like it's kind of a little bit of a standard noir for the time, but like you look at the way this is shot, and considering the technical restraints they were under, like they were like guerrilla shooting on the street and stuff like that. Like he has pretty much mastered like a lot of the technical aspects of film already, and he's just figuring out how to put the like story together for now. Like that is like the next step for him. And I feel like I haven't rewatched The Killing yet, but like that's where he kind of gets to that to build on that.
If Mom just texts me, I'll do this stuff.
I like that you mentioned the gorilla parts, Pat. I really enjoyed the two weird clown guys on the street that like steal his scarf or something, and that's what ends up like changing the plot or something. It felt sort of haphazard, but like I don't know, it was kind of fun too.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's probably the best of these films, and I think I think it's a really interesting like step forward, and like again things that you can see here, like the negative dream sequence where it's like going down the street, like that is just totally like he was going to do that in 2001 in a decade and a half, like that was like it was like you just see those little like pieces that will become whole things in his career that are his most famous images. He's just figuring it out.
That part was so cool and so David Lynch. I was just like, whoa,
This gives you this like creepy feeling, and it's so effective as well.
The when I'm forgetting the guy. Is it Gordon? Gordon's the boxer. When he spears the guy, and as like that moment of insertion happens, it cuts to a mannequin laying on, like a mannequin's face laying. I was like, oh, that's really perfect. Like Like, like you can't show gore. You probably don't have the budget to create gore.
Right.
So let's do that, especially after seeing Fear and Desire, where all the violence had zero blood.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention that, but like the like stab, 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 and you're like, no blood. But like this one was like, how do we get around that and not have that kids making a movie feel? And I thought it did really good with that.
Yeah, I think it's like his first real mature work, like where it really feels like he's coming to his own.
Yeah, it's not a quantum leap like The Killing is, but it's I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch The Killing. I've never seen it before, so
I think you'll like that one.
Yeah,
it's cool. It's funny.
Yeah, it's one of like actually I think it's like one of the best noirs. Like it's really solid.
When we do that episode, I will lead that since I'm apparently the only one who hasn't seen it, and then I can be like, this is
great,
awesome.
Should we let the audience in? Like we kind of we talked like right before the episode, and we think that rather than just go movie by movie, we're going to kind of like let each one of us lead a few movies that we like and do it that way, and then talk more about how we're shaping this film up.
Yeah.
Just
great.
Let people know.
That's the plan. So by the time we have our next episode, we'll have hopefully something to share about our short, about what we're planning on doing. We already have done some scripting and stuff, but we'll have a little bit, and then we'll also talk about The Killing.
Sounds great. This was really fun.
Yeah, really fun. That's part of it. Is why I wanted to do a podcast with you guys. Is to have an excuse to hang out